I'm going to show you a sequence of slides which I hope will reveal in an overview what I hope to cover in the next 9 weeks. So let's see what we can do here. This Egyptian artist, you will agree, made no effort to copy the face of this individual. This is a conventional rendering of a human head, and the Egyptians were primarily interested in conveying a great deal about humanity when they represented an individual figure. That is a front view of an eye on the profile, 2 views. And if we saw the whole figure, we would see multiple views all the way down. So if you're looking at the front of the eye and you see the side of the head just moved. And if the head moved, then time passes. So in representing this highly stylized abstract head, which has nothing to do with the real appearance of a human head, the artists have shown you more about the reality of a human head and a human figure than almost any other system, because they've included movement and the passage of time. That's pretty good. The Cubists ate this up. They showed you the side view, the top view, and a 3/4 view all at the same time, and it was called simultaneity. Well, simultaneously, we're seeing a multiplicity of views here, but the Egyptians could do fairly realistic but highly formalized human heads. Now, the eyes were probably out of precious stones and glass. Those have been lost. The wig is lost. But you can see the care with which they've designed the eyes. They had some inlay for the eyebrows, beautifully sculpted, formalized, smoothed out, simplified, not realistic at all. Not like anybody, but rather an ideal, like the Greek gods. Vermeer is simplifying everything. He's achieving the highest degree of formal order. The woman's shawl, or whatever that top piece of garment is a truncated cone, highly simplified. He's returned to a platonic solid. The dress is also a hemisphere at the hips, and then a cone at the bottom. The sleeves are cylinders. Most of the details have been eliminated, and it's been formalized, simplified. It doesn't look like reality. He's not striving for reality. He's striving for calm, peace, as Ang is here. And if we look at this, we notice her eye on the left looks to our left, and her eye on our right looks to our right. And her face has been smoothed out, and her nose is diminished in proportion to the rest of the head. And he's created a highly formal goddess. There are drawings of the woman that he did this portrait of, and she doesn't look like this at all. But it's a symmetrical, highly stylized and formalized classical study. And Feininger here is also a classicist. He's part of the Bauhaus. They didn't quite know what to do with him. He was an American German, but he's dealing with a highly simplified program of pure geometry, a limited palette of color, and he's again trying to achieve the same kind of harmony, proportional unity, calm that we associate with a classical temperament, with an intellectual temperament, which is after those goals. This is the ultimate in classicism, Piero della Francesca. Front views, side views, rarely 3/4 views, trying very hard to get as formal, ordered, organized, calm, rational system as one could possibly have. How different from a landscape from Rubens, which is all about energy. And it's blowing. Look at it. You come in here on this arabesque and it swings out here through that car, the rainbow. It comes back through this and out that path, swings through. All of this is moving. The earth is rumbling. The wind is blowing. There's lightning. There's drama. There's movement. This is romantic. So the difference between classicism and romanticism is one seeks order and calm, the other seeks energy and movement. And The Romantics distort, they disfigure. How would you represent the Mother of God in a state of religious ecstasy? She'd be twisted out of shape. Her features are sliding all over her face. Her chin looks to our right, the mouth looks to our left, the nose looks to our left, the eyes look to our right. There are all kinds of forms in this head that are twisted and turning in an effort to create movement, because if we look at the eyes, she's looking to our right. We look at the chin, it's looking to our left. The mouth is looking to our right. The nose is looking to our left. That head, like the Egyptian head, is moving. It isn't. But when we shift our focus, it appears to move. Others will do the same thing. All of these are distorted figures. Nobody is drawing what they saw. Van Gogh isn't drawing what he sees. His concern is with pure geometry and drawing systems, and it's based in a golden section grid. If we look at this, we discover that the shoulder passes through the mustache, through that shadow, and it hits the ear. That's called a coincidence. This shoulder comes through and it hits that point and it hits this. We have this point coming through here. We have this coming to give us that division. This comes up and joins the nose. It hits the sleeve. It hits the apex. There's a line coming from here. We're going to find that this is all about relationships and lines driven through the whole. He's not interested in appearance, and I contend that no one ever was. Or everybody's work would have to look alike. We all have the same visual equipment. We all see similarly. So here's the Kuni. Eyes, ears, nose, the whole 9 yards, but not naturalistic. All of these people are romantics. They're about energy. They're about movement. They're about drama. And here is the golden section analysis of the painter's secret geometry in an analysis of a painting by Rubens. And you can see how his arabesques are built with compass swings, that out of all the corners are radiating lines, that there are major vertical, horizontal, and diagonal divisions. It is a play of geometry, as is this. Rubens copies a piece of sculpture. The eye on our left looks to our right. It's in a cube like this, and it looks down this way. This eye is here, and it's looking up. The mouth, the nose is, the mouth is looking this way, and the chin is looking that way. It just keeps moving, doesn't it? Do you see it? So when we move from one feature to the next, it would appear that the head shifts its angle of view. Michelangelo does this in everything he plays with. The center line does this. It is not a straight line. And most people doing portraits will have an XY relationship and perpendiculars, and all of the divisions will be at right angles. Not Rubens, not Michelangelo. So this is photorealism. We've been looking at some great art. This is not great art. This looks like yesterday's brunch. And there aren't any bones in these figures. There isn't a proportional relationship. Somebody photographed a subject and then copied the photograph. Delacroix was said, of course I use the camera, but I don't copy the product of a machine. He, Degas, lots of artists have used photography, and there's no reason why you shouldn't. No reason why you shouldn't use computers today. But you don't copy it. You don't copy its product. Anne Gale is a contemporary American artist. She's fractured everything. She relies very heavily on the work of Johan Uglof, Lucien Freud, Cézanne. This is a grand tradition. This isn't about reality. This is about art. This is about romanticism. This is about energy and emotional content. Power. She, I think, is at her best very, very good. This is a student organizing a self-portrait, only using vertical and horizontal lines. Learning how to measure and learning how to organize vertical and horizontal intervals in a self-portrait. This is very important in the beginning. There are point-to-point relationships that describe triangles. You see them everywhere, but they weren't intended to be put down as triangles. They're the happenstance after the vertical and horizontal divisions have been established. And they resemble the architecture of a cathedral, don't they? Because the same systems are coming into play. The only difference here is that the architectural rendering here is on the golden section and everything is measured. Everything has a ratio proportion. Everything is organized. The student was relying on careful measurement to get all of his intervals right because he knew his head was designed on a golden section ratio, a phi ratio. The same student triangulating. How do we relate a line? Well, if the side of that ear stems from this point, and the side of that ear stems from the same point, these two lines are related in the common triangle that ties them together. If horizontally they're equally long and relate from one side to the other, they're related. If we make this ear higher and of a different proportion, then it won't relate. So what we're discovering is that triangles are relating, the nose, the nostrils, the neck is coming from a common point, angles in the hair are coming from a common point. If we look at this eyebrow, it connects with the top of that lid, but it comes up to that point and there's a triangle here. This is connected to a triangle there. Do you begin to see everything in the mouth as a triangle? And look at the energy you get from that triangle. We didn't have that kind of energy a moment ago when we looked at this head. It was fairly passive. The moment we introduce a dynamic element like the triangle, it explodes. So here's a tool. You put it in the box. If you want this kind of power, you know where to go. Why shouldn't you have a toolbox full of devices that you can employ to emphasize your intention? This is a drawing by Alberto Giacometti, School of Paris, Swiss-Italian sculptor. You can see he's searching through horizontal, vertical, triangular, and curvilinear enclosures. And he's drawing very, very rapidly with great confidence. He's a brilliant sculptor, brilliant draftsman, and a very fine painter. Claudia Rilling, one of my students, is doing a self-portrait. These pieces with their structure, with their roots in thousands of years of tradition, have power that we didn't see in the photorealism, that we don't see in photographs, that we don't see in many drawings. John Singer Sargent is a brilliant portrait painter. He's painting a young Italian who looks athletic, looks powerfully masculine. It's pure geometry. He had to find a geometric system that would convey those feelings he had for this young man's appearance and how he wished to portray him. We have a straight center line. We have a line that comes here and comes there and here. We have this coming to this point, and it's coming, well, it's not on that side. This isn't quite the same on this side. We can come down here to this point, up here to that. This comes over. This can now come here. From there we can come down to this. From here we can come here. We can run down to that. The nose is coming there. We've got triangles here. We have triangles here and here. Do you see what's going on? This is pure geometry. And this is locked in a grid. This is ordered. These people know how to draw. And the power that Sargent has conveyed in this was similar to the self-portrait based on triangulation that I showed you a moment ago. The device works. It's very useful. You could use it in architecture. You could use it in furniture design. You could use it in any application in which you wish to breathe an enormous amount of movement, energy, and vitality. Well, what's the difference between an illustration and a work of art? I would say the difference is the illustrator here chose to eliminate anything that interfered with the representation of the color and shape and character of a specific species of apple. This rendering would allow you to take a print of this into a huge grocery shop where there are hundreds of apple varieties and choose and find this specific apple, this variety. It's very effective. So it belongs in a book on horticulture, not in a museum. But what would we expect from it if it were a work of art? First of all, if we look at a Chardin, we look and we see Chardin has transformed the fruit into a collection of geometric solids. He said, this is a truncated cone. Got it? And he's saying this, with this truncation here, is a truncated sphere. Got it? He's translated it into this. Then he's saying, in addition to that, I'm going to have the light coming here, I'm going to have shadow on this side, and I'm going to have my core of the shadow here, and I'm going to have a reflected light there. I've got a cast shadow defining the plane upon which this pair sits. I'm now describing depth of space, and one presumes an ant could be seen passing behind this pair. So he's lit it, he's colored it, but he's reconstructed it because he has to achieve on a two-dimensional surface the illusion of the third dimension. Now that's a lie. Your flat piece of paper has only two dimensions, height and width. So you have to start tricking the eye and playing games, and this is how we start. We look at an apple that has no form, is as flat and uninteresting as anything could be, and we realize that if we wish to turn it into a three-dimensional solid, we're going to have to give it three faces. Each face is going to have a different value. The core of the shadow has to be advancing and come forward. We need reflected light coming into the shadow side, and the cast shadow should describe the plane upon which the object sits. And if we can't do those things, we'll end up with two-dimensional fruit. It's good enough for Matisse, wasn't good enough for Cézanne, wasn't good enough for Fontaine-Latour. I presume it won't be good enough for you. So we have to transform the fruit into a plane on the top and a plane in front and a plane on the side and a cast shadow on this and a light that reflects into it, and the core comes forward, and each of these planes has to have a different value. And suddenly we have clarity. But what we see out of a kitchen window is almost useless. Copying that's a waste of time. That isn't what's going to create a still life for us. Now, I like to think of these apples by Ellsworth Kelly as a bunch of puppies cavorting. They're dolphins. They're little animals. They're kids. They're giggling, they're laughing, they're teasing, they're frolicking. They're full of humor. I've got to remember who Ellsworth Kelly is. He's an ancient American grand artist who does huge geometric pieces of metal that are painted one color. They're all exquisitely warped planes that are two-dimensional. But he loves to do fruit, veg, and plants, and he's doing it here. And let's take a minute and look at these, because they had to be thoroughly transformed to be filled with the humor and the mirth that he wished to express in this drawing. So the first thing he does is he's not drawing apples at all. And to get these to tip in different directions, he has to do what we had suggested earlier. He has to transform these into three-dimensional solids, and without that process, they aren't rolling or turning or changing direction at all. So, if we agree that he's done this, we end up with this. Now, they're a riot. They're running all over the place. They're rolling and twisting, and they're really having a very good time. And these are related in that thrust. That is a coincidence. It coincides with 3 of these, and we get this running here as well. We have quite a variety of thrusts and directions running through these apples. Now, they're in a root 5 rectangle, and they're in overlapped root 5 rectangles, but I'm not going to belabor that today. So, this is a coincidence from this point to that point to that. This coincides to this point. This hits here, and it hits there. This comes through to that point. This hits here and that. This comes down to this. These two are connecting. This is parallel to that. This and this are parallel. This is no accident. This is an organized ensemble. This is a major piece of design. Now, he's done other things here as well. At each of these points, there's a vertical. And this coincides with that. This coincides with this. This coincides with that. This is coming down. This hits here. This one hits there. We have horizontal. We have horizontal lines running through here. This is coming through. This is coming through. This connects. You begin to see what's going on top of all those diagonals that we had earlier. But there's a curvilinear element in this as well, because the arabesque flows. Do you see it? The arabesque flows through all of this. All of these flowing movements carry us through the whole game. All of this is going on. This is subliminal. I believe that artists realize that they can reach into your nervous system and influence how you respond without you really being aware of what they're doing. And this is somehow the way they do it. So these flow through this way. You see it. Can you see how that works? Those link in that fashion. These link this way. So we have that coming through here. So we can open this up. We can come back and we can say these work this way. There are many, many, many games going on in this piece. Collectively, I believe Ellsworth Kelly has revealed that he has a wonderful sense of humor, but more importantly, he's loved drawing all of his life, and he's able to employ the language with consummate success. And communicating a sense of humor is not an easy thing to do. I think he has. And I think they do look like little critters having a very, very good time and rolling and playing and all sorts of things. So the artist needs to organize what he's doing. This, nothing connects. If somebody gave you this, a painting based on this lack of organization, you put it up in your room, in your living room, after about a week, you would take it down. After 2 weeks, you'd put it in the cellar. After 3 weeks, you'd have a garage sale. On the other hand, if somebody gave you this, you might keep it up a little bit longer, but not much, because it's just about as monotonous as anything can be, and it doesn't have a principal element, and it doesn't have a theme or a purpose, so the garage sale might be in a month or two. But you wouldn't keep it for long. It's not interesting. Here's a Japanese design for rooster, based on a diamond. Now, a diamond is a square on its point. all 45-degree angles, and it gives us a gamut. A gamut means the limited number of directions you employ in a design. So what do we got? We've got the 45-degree angle this way, which is called the sinister diagonal, and the 45-degree angle this way, which is called the Baroque diagonal. From point to point, we have verticals running through it, and from point to point this way, we have horizontals as well. So we have two 45s, verticals and horizontals. That's a very limited gamut. Remember, we got 360 angles in a circle. Only 4 have been used, or 5. This is consistent with Leonardo, it's consistent with Van Gogh, it's consistent with Rembrandt. You simply don't throw the whole kitchen sink and everything in the fridge into every dish. This is Juan Gris having a perfectly wonderful time regimenting an army of apples. And you can see the boxes now, can't you? But he's got a sense of humor too, because there's an earthquake going on. Look at the way, trying to maintain balance, that fruit bowl has twisted and changed directions in an effort not to fall off the table. And this is all twisted and bent like a rag that's been wound up to be wrung out. Do you see it? All kinds of devices are being employed to give this the dynamic Gris was interested in. This is a 2,500-year-old mosaic. 2,500 years ago, all of these conventions that we're talking about were fully understood by Greek. This would be a Greco-Roman artist because this was found in Italy, but a lot of the artists were Greek slaves or artists that were imported from Greece to do all of these skills that the Romans themselves didn't have. So let's see what he's doing. He's saying the eye is an ovoid, and he is reticulating this into tessera. That one unit is a tessellation. It's a facet. He's taken the nose and he said, this is the front of a pyramid, this is the side coming down, this is the other side coming down, and he's arranged the tessellations in a way that will describe the third dimension. The cheeks are hemispheres, and the lobes of the mouth are hemispheres as well, and you can see the chin is a hemisphere also. This is the most permanent way of painting man has ever created, because these colored, fired bits of ceramic locked in a cement base don't fade. If they're not misused, they last forever. 2,500 years, there aren't any Greek paintings that have survived. A couple of frescoes, thanks to Vesuvius, but not much. Paper, canvas deteriorates pretty quickly. So tessellations are what the computer uses to describe smoke, to describe clouds, to describe water. How wonderful if we can throw a Cartesian net of squares over anything and describe it as if it were solid. Well, we have to learn how to do this, and Uccello did. This chalice is on the golden section, it's 1 point perspective, and every one of these tessellated planes, as if it were a computer printout, except it's 500 years old and older, describes volume. Every brushstroke in a Van Gogh describes a plane. Every thumb slide on clay in a sculpture describes a plane. Every slice with a chisel in marble or granite describes a plane. You have to hallucinate planes on the surface that doesn't have any. The human face has no planes, has no straight lines. Here's Dürer reticulating a head. Very much shorthand, but he has to be able to organize the way the light's going to fall on a human head. And he wants to go all the way down. He wants to go light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. He wants rhythm. He wants the throb happening in his work, so he wants to alternate, get as much variety as he can. He wants to know that the light's coming from the upper left, it's falling on this side, it's Rembrandt lighting, long before Rembrandt came along. But the idea is everybody's doing this. Karl Moll has turned his mustache into a series of planes. If I say formalize, it means you eliminate all the details and you break this down into its simplest geometric form. Van Gogh is doing this continually. Gauguin is doing this continually. Monet is doing this continually. People do not copy what they see. It doesn't work on a flat surface. So everything Moll is doing here is intended to create the illusion of the third dimension, to give his work weight and form. So we have to understand the interior geometry of three-dimensional solids. We have to be able to plot planes and truncate and move around inside of it. This is what Dürer is doing. He's saying, I could cut here, and I'd have that brow if I took that piece out. I could come through here, and I could come back here, and I could leave this bit. Do you see it? I could chop into this any way I want, but the point is I have vertical section lines, and I have horizontal section lines. And I could cut anywhere I wanted because I understand the schematic representation of the third dimension on a two-dimensional surface. Absolutely paramount. Ellsworth Kelly does this, so does Gries. Sid Mead does it here. So he's created these racing creatures. He's understood the anatomy of horses and dogs, the anatomy of machinery. He's built himself a perfectly wonderful series of devices. He's very, very clever. Designs automobiles, he designs aircraft, he designs nightclubs, he did the Blade Runner interiors, he did all the costumes for that film and for many, many more. He's an industrial designer and an illustrator. So early man imagined that his creator or creators had designed the universe in which he existed. There's some who believe it even today. And they measured everything. And when they measured everything, by George, they discovered that that simple ratio that you saw working on my hand worked here. Look, you see it. Everything in nature, snowflakes, flowers, trumpet heads, ferns, you name it, everything. Everything they looked at verified in their mind that somebody was using a system and they'd better learn that language. I use the word organic quite often. Everything about this dried plant is organic. If, however, I were to come in and produce here a rectangular element, it wouldn't be organic. It would violate the unity and the integrity of what's happening in that design. A great bulbous piece of red plastic seat with little wire legs with rubber balls on the ends of them is not organic. Thin wire legs have nothing to do with great floppy shapes. This has nothing to do with that. But if I were to come in and I were to play with the spiral again, that would work. It would be consistent with the gamut, with the limited number of devices employed by the designer of this. In this case, choose whom you will. The same is true here. If I bring one element in here that violates the integrity of the whole scheme, it's not organic. It doesn't work. The same would happen here. So once you set up a rhythm, first of all, you ought to be aware of what you're doing, but you've got to be consistent with it so that you have unity, so things are related. They diminish as they go up, both in interval vertically. See, each of these changes. Do they? They look awfully close to one another, don't they? They are. But certainly these get smaller as they move up. So we have that happening on the edges of these. See what I'm saying? There's a relationship. Bring one out too far, and I've violated all of our expectations. Well, this has to happen in everything you draw and everything you design. It needn't be figurative. It can be abstract. But it's going to have to be organized. So the Egyptian gives you the side view of an eye, the front view of an eye, the side view of the face, the front view of the chest, the side view of the arms, the side view of the hips, and the side view of the legs. But he's changing everything. Notice the only great toes. Egyptian pharaohs didn't have any little toes. They didn't show you little toes. Those weren't very fashionable. But on the left, we have the golden section intervals that all of this proportion is based on, and it's a canon of squares. Well, there's a canon here too. Every field is cleared of the stones by the initial farmer, and generally these fields were about a furlong. A furlong was the amount of work a horse could do in one day. So the landscape has been ordered by the farmer's needs since the beginning of time. Our coded marks for a composer can be read by a performer, by an orchestra, by an interested, educated audience. Football players need a grid. There's a grid for Hindu art. Leonardo does a measured figure, and he's building it out of two-dimensional figures, triangles, rectangles, truncated triangles. We're going to address a bottle in this class in a moment. It's going to be based on the same kind of thinking. This is a root 2 rectangle. I showed you the root phi, the phi rather. Now this is a root rectangle, and I will discuss this briefly in a minute. But you see, in the root system, if you have the Baroque diagonal, which is what we're using here, this is the Baroque, and we said that was the sinister. This is the sinister reciprocal, a line that comes from a corner intersecting a major diagonal at exactly 90 degrees, a right angle. You could put a cut piece of paper in here. And where it hits here, you drop a vertical, and when you do, this root 2, which is horizontal, breaks down into two root 2s, which are smaller and vertical. Now, if I divide this in half, I get 4 root 2s, which are horizontal but smaller. I can continue breaking this down at this point where this hits. These are root 2s. These are root 2s. These are, do you see it? It goes on and on and on, but it gives us a repeated series of diagonals, a limited gamut or series of directions which we will employ if we choose to design in a root 2 or one of the other root rectangles, which you'll learn about as this course progresses. So here is, and I'm going to mention this, not that you're going to understand it today, but you will later. The dash is the square. So if I take a compass here and I bring it down, it's going to give me a square with its 45-degree angles in that dashed red. And if I bring one down this way, it's going to give me these. Can you see that diamond in red there? Can you see that and this parallel? This is called the St. Andrew's cross. If you swing the short side over onto the longer side, you overlap squares. Most artists use this because the shorter side and its square is an important building block in pure design. The diagonals, this is the Baroque and the sinister. This is the sinister reciprocal. This is a Baroque reciprocal. This is a root 2 on the theme of 3. So instead of dividing it here, here, and here, where we did earlier, now we're dividing it into thirds. We got 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, but they're still root 2s. Now, this is a painting by a 14-year-old by the name of Pablo Picasso in a root 3. His father was an art teacher, couldn't keep a job, wasn't very good, was a mediocre painter. The family moved all over the place. The old man had a house full of women to take care of and this spoiled brat, Pablo. But the kid got drawing instruction from a very early age. 13-year-olds don't draw with straight lines. You've got to be trained to formalize everything into straight lines. Nature, remember, has none. So that's a dead giveaway that this kid is very, very heavily trained. If we take that diagonal through, it's going to connect with and coincide with that sleeve. It's going to hit his eye. It's going to come up and hit that candlestick. So there's an awful lot going on here that this 14-year-old has mastered. And this will reveal it. This is a root 2 on the theme of 3. And all of the candlesticks are organized on and in this root 2. And the candelabra is organized in that root 2. And this root 2 is organizing his sister, who's posing as a First Communion girl. This is his father, and this is his mother. Not bad for a 14-year-old. But there are no straight lines in nature. And when we look at these reverse curves that occur in nature, we're going to call them arabesques. And we'll add them to the straight lines that we organize everything we do with. In nature, if you draw a plant or a leaf and you're not paying attention to its relationships, it's going to look wrong. You have to bring information to bear. They say only through drawing do you learn how to see. So if you were to follow that reverse curve, you would find that all of them, all of these veins in this leaf flow from a point outside of the leaf. Their commonality and their relationship stems from the outside. Are you able to see what we're talking about a little bit when I keep using the word relationship? Something has to unify a group of elements if they're going to be related to one another. They could be parallel to one another. They could be 90 degrees to another system. They have to be enclosed in arcs. Something has to relate them. In this case, it's a radiating arc. So what I want to do is to cause you as students to look at bottles not like a citizen, but like a designer. When you look at a bottle, I don't want you to see a bottle. What I want you to do is imagine the bottle perceived through the mind of its designer. What vocabulary of two-dimensional figures did the designer employ to create this particular bottle? First of all, there's a notional space. And by notional space, I mean we have to place this in a rectangle. Now I'm going to ask you to measure it. I'm going to ask you to measure the shorter distance, gesundheit, into the longer. 1, 2, probably it comes here. I'm going to say that's 2 there. And here's 2. So here we are, 2, 3, say that's, so let's say this is 4 units. And so it's a 1 by 4, all right? What we have is we have 4 squares. That's the proportion of this unit. And this is fairly parallel to that. Rough, but fairly parallel. So we know what the ratio proportion is. Now we have two-dimensional figures. To start with, we have a rectangle here. We have a rectangle there. We have a circle here. We have a triangle there and a triangle here. We have a rectangle here. We have a rectangle there, and if we want, we can put circles there. That's what the designer put together. Now, if I said that there are 2 traditions in art generally, the intellectual or classical and the romantic or emotional, we've got 2 gods. One would be Dionysus, who would be the god of vigor and energy and drunkenness and wine. And I don't want to tell you what else he played games with. And he would be a romantic, interested in energy and movement and activity. And the other would be Apollo, the god of order, intellect. And he would be a classical artist. So this is a classical analysis, an intellectual analysis, a technical analysis of the bottle. But we also want to pay service to Dionysus, to Bacchus, to energy. And to do that, we're going to create a whole series of drawings which are based on the energy of working very rapidly. And that would be a gesture drawing. And when we saw Giacometti's portrait of that young woman, we saw how rapidly he was working. That was a gesture drawing. Now, both of these are dealing with the same material. One, you ought to be able to see somebody moving and they take a pose and you're impressed with it and you've got it fixed in your mind's eye and you pick up a pen or a pencil or a brush and you jot down the major directions and shapes and forms that you see in it, and you won't have to photograph it. You've got it forever. Well, this is what we're going to do tonight. We're going to go into the other room in a moment, and you're going to do a series of gesture drawings of a bottle setup that I'm going to give you. I have to explain a little bit more what I want of you, because if you don't understand the expectations, you can't be expected to do a workmanlike job. So pause for a moment and look at the figures, two-dimensional, triangles, circles, and rectangles in a couple of bottles. Now, I want to mention this is the ugliest bottle I own. This is a mishmash. I mean, this is grotesque, but that's nice. You can see all the shapes. This is much more sophisticated, much more beautifully organized. It's all based on triangles and circles. It's rather nicely done, and it's fairly varied because the bottom is a conical form. The top has a series of cones in it because you'll see that that hits here, and we have a center line coming down, and this comes down, this would hit here, and this one's hitting there, and we have this coming through here. This now probably merges with something way up here. This is coming down. Then we've got that, and we have this. Do you see what's going on? And then we have a circle there, and then this is coming down to a common point at the bottom. We have a horizontal there and there. So if we're going to do a gesture drawing of this two-dimensionally, this is what we're up to. These are the figures we're going to have to put down. Does that make sense? Does everybody see it? And if we understand what we're doing and we know we've got a triangle there, and we've got this here, and we want this one, and we want another one, and we want a circle, and then that's pretty good. That's what I haven't scribbled. I've rapidly noted the most important two-dimensional figures in the construction, and if I do this, and I do that, you can either applaud or burst into tears, but that's not bad, all right? That's not bad. When you can hit the proportions on top of everything else, you've had a little experience. I must confess, I have done this before. You may not believe that, but I have done this before. So, let's say in a few minutes, we go into the other room, into the studio. Here's Giacometti doing a gesture drawing. He's in a hotel room. He smokes very heavily. He died of cancer. There are ashtrays, cigarette packs, matches, glasses, a newspaper, all kinds of nonsense piled up on that table. But in drawing them, he's got to relate them. He's more concerned with relationships and the dynamics of movement than he is in the accuracy of observation. This coincides with that. This hits here and the corner here, and it hits the corner there. This cast shadow hits this, the bottom of that hits the glasses. He's built his glasses in a three-dimensional notional space. You see what he's doing? There is a relationship between this and that, and if I bring that down, it's going to break with this. I can bring this, the bottom of that hits the top of this ashtray, this hits that. My point being that absolutely everything here relates to everything else. Do you see what he's up to? He is drawing, he's not copying. Now, the chances are the placement of these objects was just happenstance. He may have moved a couple of them, but he's principally concerned with this arabesque. See it? And he has these running this way. Do you see how he's organized it? Do you see what he's up to? He's playing with ribbons of movement, and they are linked. Now, they're related because they all are collected up in an arc, in a ribbon that's three-dimensional. These people are trained. They don't scribble. And it takes an awful lot of skill to draw this rapidly. And I'll tell you somebody else who can draw this rapidly. His name was Raphael. Brilliant, brilliant gesture drawings. I mean, all built up out of enclosures. Nice stuff. This is a Perrier bottle. They don't make it anymore. They put a screw top on it and ruined it. But you can see the student